All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight into your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, after the elections last night, we need to talk totalitarianism again and authoritarianism because New York is effed. I won't get us canceled right at the beginning of this and marked on YouTube. It
Yeah.
is effed, effed, effed. But one of the things that we were talking about before this that is very relevant now, I'm gonna quote Matthias Desmet, who from a podcast he was on with one of my favorite authors and your favorite authors, Ian McGilchrist. Uh, he's they were talking about the nature of totalitarianism and why it actually is it never works. Just as we talked
Eh,
about with Mao and Stalin and Pol Pot and all of these Napoleon, all of these figures, it never works in the long run. And he puts it in a way of kind of sociology and psychology here. And to quote him, he says, "Uncertainty is the precondition to be human." And totalitarianism tries to eliminate uncertainty. And in doing so, it eliminates humanity itself. And as we've talked about many times, reality always wins. And if you eliminate humanity in a society, then the humans will always rebel in the end. The problem is it's not pretty. We don't want that. We want to stop
yes.
that before it happens.
Well, also, I think I've brought this up a while ago, and it bears repeating here because they got into, first of all, Desmet's specialty is the psychology of totalitarianism.
Mhm.
That is his academic work. That is what he's written on
Well, and
and published
especially
on.
how mob psychosis can happen in
So
in
yes,
creating
not
that.
just the
Yes. Yeah.
psychology of the totalitarian, but then the psychology of propaganda that leads the masses to totalitarianism.
Hmm.
And and for a long time, there was this strain of thought, especially on the right, that was co-opted by I I hate when they use the term capitalism in this discussion because that's not what it is. It's big business. There's a difference.
Hmm.
And and so this
Corporatism.
yes,
Yeah.
this strain of thought was co-opted by corporatism because there was so much money to be made if you had the right connections in China as China was developing in the 80s and 90s. And the school of thought was that once a society becomes developed enough, especially as technology in the early days of the internet, as technology expanded the reach of speech, free speech, you could not have a totalitarian regime. That the emerging technologies of the internet and of communication was going to make it such that in the future totalitarianism would be impossible. That the totalitarianism of that Orwell foresaw in the 50s when he wrote 1984 would not be possible. Well, Orwell actually kind of, even before anyone knew what the internet is or was or could be, Orwell kind of foresaw that because remember, your TV is spying on you in 1984.
Hmm.
Okay.
Which
So
we have this nice little camera right here.
yep, yep. Yeah, and so if you see clips from one of the more, iconic clips from the movie version of 1984, is our protagonist huddled up in the corner where he's got that little brick that he takes out where he hides his journal so he can actually have creative free thought, but he has to do it in secret and he has to hide in the corner so so the camera on his TV can't see him. Well, that's what China did. And China turned it up to 11. I mean, the how
Britain's
many
doing it right
Black
now.
Mirror episodes are basically this is what's going on in China right now?
Hmm. Yeah, the UK is doing it right now. They have
Yes.
what do they call their surveillance system?
Oh, I can't remember, but yeah, they have been doing what China did, which is China is the most surveilled place on the planet. They have cameras everywhere, and that is what they have been developing AI for, is to um facial recognition to track people, but also body language, so you can see this person's a potential problem here because of their body language.
Well,
So,
yeah, I
and
remember it was very disturbing coming back to the States, and it was when I went to London. Uh, it didn't happen when I came back from Germany, which was after that again, but I came back from London and I was coming through customs where you normally hand your passport. They ask you all the questions about where you were, what you were doing, all of that. And I was walking up with my passport out and they pointed a camera at me. This is in the States. This should not exist in the States yet because it's technically not legal. But they pointed a camera at me and they waved me through. And it was like, wait a minute. You're not supposed to have that here.
Mhm,
But you have to do it on your way out because all the other countries, it is part of their legal system. And I was like, no, 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 you're supposed to stop me, look at my passport, interview me, talk about what's in my suitcases, all of those things. And you just waved me through.
mhm. This is why. So I said I don't know where to go with this because there's so much there, and we should post the link to this discussion in the description because it is there's so much depth there. And it just so happened that a couple of days ago when I needed to veg, I caught up on some Friday Night Tights on the Nerdrotic channel, and they were talking about Beardy McBeardface. Matt Walsh had made a big deal about it. It had kind of gone viral, him talking about how pop culture peaked between, I think he said 2006 and 2009. And they were all laughing and kind of making fun of him, and rightfully so to a degree of, you know, they were basically the whole panel was doing the scene from Die Hard, Welcome to the Party, pal,
Hmm.
because this is why these people have been talking about it for so long and excoriating the people on the right for saying like, yeah, pop culture doesn't matter. No, pop culture absolutely matters. And this is where McGilchrist comes in talking about the hemispheres of the brain,
Hmm.
with marrying what he has done with his work on the hemispheres of the
And,
brain with what Desmet was talking
and
about.
just to review that for anybody who's new to the channel, the left side loves predictability and loves heuristics and loves schema. The right side it takes in new information and processes it, and then they work together to make schema to actually make us more efficient in
Hmm.
life. Pop music. Watch the Four Chords guys. I think you can just search on Instagram the Four Chords guys, and they go through every major hit from like 1990 something to now, and it's the same four chords because it's
Yes.
predictable and your brain loves it. And
Yes.
I say pop died after American Idol. When American Idol started is when I started hating pop music because it's the same thing.
There
Every,
are a lot of videos on this from like technical people, like people who know
Mhm.
music on a technical level, who will talk about how music was killed by becoming formulaic. There were always formulas in the same way that there are always formulas for story. We listen to our Saturday episodes where we overthink Wheel of Time and how often we talk about the tropes.
Mhm.
He
No,
twists them, he
the
turns
brain
them on
loves
their
it.
heads.
The brain
So
loves it. Yeah.
Jordan is following the hero's journey in rough outline, but then it's not formulaic because he has interesting twists on the plot and the characters and
Mhm.
that journey that the multiple heroes go through. You can look at, you know, both the male and female protagonists, and all of them go through some variation of the hero's journey,
Mhm.
but it's all different, it's all interesting. And so he follows
Well,
the
a great
formula without
example
being
if you want to bring the feminine into it is Nynaeve
formulaic.
because she is the ultimate mother of the series. She is the matriarch of the series,
Yes.
but she was raised by her father.
Mm. And the where this all connects together is these these stories, this creativeness is what the totalitarians attack.
Hmm.
They want, as we have said before, the totalitarian thinks of you, treats you as, and wants you to be a widget. And so this is a lot of what Orwell talks about when he talks about controlling language in 1984 is, and this was what popped into my head with this overlap between the neurotic type people, the culture critics, and what Desmet was saying about language and the attempt to control. And a big part of that in modernity, especially within the last 50 years and escalating in the past couple of decades, is simplifying language. And he had this really interesting take about what makes us different from animals is that even animals that have very complicated communication systems, like primates or like whales and dolphins, sea mammals, they have some pretty complicated communication systems. But one always equals one, and two always equals two. So if anyone who has ever had a dog, you can see with the way they interact with each other and the way they interact with you, yeah, they can understand your commands, so they can understand your language to a degree, but it's always a simple this is this, that is that. Human language, especially English, is incredibly nuanced.
Hmm.
There is always a degree of uncertainty in language. So,
Well, and you're familiar with Eastern languages where the inflection
mhm,
matters as much as the word itself. Yeah.
yes,
So
I've
which text makes that very difficult, right?
exactly, which is,
Yeah.
why one of the many reasons I can't learn Viet, and my wife has tried to teach me, and she eventually goes, "Okay, that's good enough." And I can just tell by the tone of her voice, again, the nuance of language, that wasn't good enough. Not even close.
Good
Um,
enough for a white boy,
yeah,
yes.
exactly. So I found that idea very interesting and very true, but also why there is such a affinity for this new totalitarianism amongst young people, because the world is scary. Uncertainty is scary.
Hmm.
And nuance is the epitome of uncertainty. Nuance is us trying to navigate the uncertainty of interacting with another human being when it's hard enough to know what's going on in your own mind when you can literally read your own mind. I can't read your mind. I don't know what you're thinking here as I'm talking, and a part of my brain while I'm trying to talk and make my point is also looking at your facial features, looking at what your eyes are doing, looking at what your body's doing, looking at the way you move your head and going, what's that mean? What's that mean? What's that mean? It is, um, I think I said this before. My wife's biggest criticism of Better Late Than Single was that for most of the for a lot of them, especially the women, most of the women. Now you found out later that the one kind of main girl that we liked, oh no, she had issues because she grew up in an abusive home. So okay, that's why you have had a problem developing a relationship. But for most of the other women, they just never bothered to put themselves out there. And
Hmm.
she was kind of ranting about this of like, okay, these guys, most of these guys, they have some serious psychological mental issues they need to work through in order to make themselves appealing to a woman. Most of these women just never bothered to put themselves out there. And you can understand that because it's scary.
Hmm. Well, and that's so back to the nature of how pop culture is contributing to this. We talked about how pop culture is about predictability anymore. And these spectrum disorders that we talk about, and I'm going to talk about autism. So the tism is going to come out here. They're malleable, especially at a very young age. So yes, you have a genetic predisposition to it, but the reality is almost everybody kind of does. Unless you're just like super high genetically in openness, which is very, very rare, you're going to be kind of in that range where you could shift into the spectrum. And if we create an environment which enter cell phones and computers and internet, AI, all of these things, the school system as it is designed by the Prussian system we talked about last
Hmm.
time. All of these things, they actually can shift you towards that. And one of the major traits in the DSM-5TR for diagnosing the TISM is aversive response to novelty. So if here's a good test if you feel like you've kind of fallen down this route or this road, if you have the insight enough to say, hey, maybe I have, then you're still you can be helped. Okay, listen to some pop music, listen to your favorite pop music, and then listen to something that is designed with discord, like some heavy metal music. And if it feels like your brain is being ripped away, you've been pushed down this road. Now, granted, metal's not for everybody, but there's all kinds of music that uses Discord. So look at standard television and then watch a show that's supposed to make you think really hard. How does that make you feel inside? Are you uncomfortable while you're doing it? So, these kind of things. So it's yeah, this is why culture is so important because the people who want to socially engineer us are the ones pushing this. Why do you think Hollywood was open during COVID? Why was Hollywood a necessary industry? Why were liquor stores considered necessary during COVID? Look at what we did to the indigenous Americans. Alcohol. We put them in a daze.
Yeah, and once we got them on the reservations, that was something that was supplied um
Hmm.
to, you know, to keep them in that days. There were arguments about, well, they're all gonna get hopped up on liquor and they're going to go off on a rampage, and that there were times where that happened, but most of the time
It sedates.
it sedates.
It's a depressant.
And
Yeah.
you see that even to this day, and that's where a lot of Native Americans will castigate the reservation system because it still works that way. Is you get in the reservation housing, you get on your food stamps, and you have your liquor, and you just sit.
I'll take it another layer. Why are casinos legal in reservations? Pulling that lever, pulling that lever, pulling that lever, pulling that
Hmm.
lever.
Hmm. And so pulling the lever is a great kind
So,
of
so for
segue back
for
to
all
what we're
the
talking about
for
here.
all the postmodernists and the social justice warriors that might have accidentally stumbled across this, that's actually systemic racism.
Yeah.
That is a true example of it.
So back up. You're getting me somewhere where I was going because you are taking a class now where you have had to tiptoe around CRT DEI um, ideas,
Which I am
and
the
so
discussion leader tonight. So,
yep,
yep.
and so we've been talking about that, and I'll get there in just a second. But the to Matt back to Matt Walsh's point about pop culture dying, one of the main things that led to this death is something we haven't talked about in a while. Do you have the charts handy of the word usage in major you know what I'm talking about,
I know
in major
exactly what you're talking
newspaper
about.
publications? So pop culture, especially movies and TV, became more and more simplistic because what you were allowed to talk about, what you were allowed to think, became narrower and narrower and narrower. Um, this phenomenon has existed for a long time. Back to China. I'll bring China back up here. That for a long time, the best Chinese dramas and movies were Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong got taken over by China, and then it became Taiwan because the Chinese Communist Party is very strict about what you are allowed to talk about and how you're allowed to talk about it.
Okay, so this is the chart Heath was talking about here,
Mhm.
and this also coincides with the reformation of the Smith-Mundt Act, which originally was written in the 1940s because of what we saw in Nazi Germany to prohibit the government from propagandizing
Mhm.
population. In 2012 to the 2013 CR continuing resolution, it was amended so the government could. And after that, we see the charts here. Right after that, I'm going to put 2012 right here on the little cursor. All of a sudden, the usage of the word white privilege, racial privileges jumped. What is that? 400%?
Yeah, it skyrockets.
Skyrockets. And these
It
are
is
across,
almost straight up. Yeah.
yeah, and these are across multiple, I think it's New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and what is that, Los
Los
Angeles
Angeles Times.
Times? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then we see whiteness, quote unquote, jumps up the same 400%, actually more, a little bit more. And then racial hierarchies jumps and white supremacist jumps the same 400 to 600%. So, yeah, as soon as it was legal, technically, by congressional act to, of course, it was a 5,000 page document that it was probably thrown in there as one paragraph that
Hmm.
nobody read. Uh, as soon as it was legal to propagandize the citizens of the United States by the government, these things shot up. Now, part of that's the fault of the or responsibilities on the academic sector because they're the ones training these journalists as well. But it wasn't legal to do until then. But all of a sudden, these phrases shot up, and all of a sudden, they were part of our mainstream dialogue. And I had to deal with this with the Colin Kaepernick thing because of the field I'm in, and it all made sense when I finally researched it. When they say racism, I mean, obviously it's going to be skewed because of the channel, but if you pulled 100 people off the street in your local neighborhood, they would give you a definition of discrimination or acts against somebody else from a different demographic. But when you hear it in this context, it actually means something different. It means the whole system is set up against groups of people to not fail whether the act actually happened. So the answer is if somebody calls me or Heath, if you only listen to us, we're both white guys. If someone calls us racist, by one definition, it would be not true because we don't do those things.
Hmm.
Definition most people would give.
Hmm.
But by the Colin Kaepernick definition, by the academia definition, what's used in the media now, we can't help but be.
And so the late great Rush Limbaugh foresaw this during the campaign because he would get a lot of callers, and this happened. There is exit polling to show that this was a real phenomenon that thought, well, yeah, I don't like his policies. Yeah, he's really lefty, but once we elect Barack Obama as the first black president, then we can move on. Then we will have triumphed over racism and the issue will be dead. And he said, "Are you insane? It will only get worse." And people thought he was the crazy one for saying it will only get worse because he rightly pointed out they're going to use it as a cudgel and turn it up to 11 because they're going to claim that any criticism of Obama is racist, inherently racist. And lots of people pointed out, I don't want Obama elected for the same reason I didn't want Jimmy Carter to have a second term, because Obama was basically Jimmy Carter's second term in policy wise. And this, the reason this connects is because this is the simplification of language, the destruction of nuance. We aren't allowed to talk about complicated, difficult issues like racial, ethnic, cultural issues because no, you are ipso facto racist even for bringing it up
Hmm.
to the point
Yeah,
where,
which is it's a disservice to the people they say they're helping
yeah.
because
So
yeah.
this is me proving
Oh,
my,
come on.
you're welcome. For those just watching, Sam just about had a spit take there. Um,
What what is with this headline? Come on.
This is great. So this is from March 2007. So this is still during the primary for the Democratic nomination for the 2008 presidential election. And there is a fun story behind this Los Angeles Times op, opinion piece by a man named David Ehrenstein.
Oh, so okay, so now we're bringing in a Jewish uh author on Obama as the
Oh, but it gets
magic.
better than that
Yeah, oh God.
because he's
Come on,
only,
you're killing me here.
yes, his last name Ehrenstein because his father was a Polish Jew. His mother's black.
I'm just a
Speaking of
I'm just a
nuance,
French Polak trying to get through life here, Heath, and you're killing me.
and
Killing me, Smalls.
the headline is Obama the Magic Negro. And for anyone who doesn't know, there is a trope and there is a hilarious Key and Peele sketch about the Magic Negro.
Yeah, but Key and Peele are allowed.
Exactly, because they are also black. So this created a huge controversy, not because of David Ehrenstein, but because Rush Limbaugh picked this up, read it, and then he had a conservative satirist, comedian, musician that would do parody songs.
I'm just gonna say his name because it's the only thing that can complete the circle. Charlie Kirk. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, keep
So
going.
Paul Shanklin wrote a song where he does this great imitation of Al Sharpton. And that is part of the point of this article is that Obama's the safe one. Al Sharpton, people forget Al Sharpton was running in that primary.
Yeah,
And
I
that is
remember.
kind of
Yeah.
Ehrenstein's, that is part of his
What was it
point.
hit? Oh, I thought it was Jesse Jackson then. When did he run?
No, Jackson ran in the 90s.
Okay.
He was in the 92 primary against Clinton.
Okay.
And then Sharpton ran against Hillary Clinton and Obama in the 2007-2008 primary. Okay. So I'm just going to read a bit of this to give you an idea of what this is talking about. And again, this is 2007. So very shortly after this, Nuance was killed on purpose. As every carbon based life form on this planet surely knows, Barack Obama, the junior Democratic senator from Illinois, is running for president. Since making his announcement, there has been no end of commentary about him in all quarters, musing over his charisma and the prospect he offers of being the first African American to be elected to the White House. But it's clear that Obama is also running for an equally important unelected office in the province of the popular imagination, the quote, magic Negro. The Magic Negro is a figure of postmodern folk culture coined by snarky 20th century sociologists to explain a cultural figure who emerged in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education. Quote, he has no past, he simply appears one day to help the white protagonist, in quote, reads the description on Wikipedia. And he links to the trope of the magical Negro in a Wikipedia entry. Go away, Los Angeles Times pop up. Leave me alone. He's there to assuage white guilt, i.e., the minimal discomfort they feel over the role of slavery and racial segregation in American history, while replacing stereotypes of a dangerous, highly sexualized black man with a benign figure for whom interracial sexual congress holds no interest. As might be expected, this figure is chiefly cinematic. As an aside, let me interrupt here. Ehrenstein's primary focus was as a culture slash movie critic. And I believe he is homosexual, but don't quote me on that. I don't really care. The point
Don't
being,
try to make this better.
yeah, he focused a lot on gay themes and racial themes within cinema. So that is where he's coming from when he's talking about. So this is right up his wheelhouse of the movie slash TV trope of the magical Negro, the Bagger Vance who shows up to to mentor the white kid and then just kind of disappears. Like, oh, shut up and go away. Okay. Um, as might be expected, this figure is chiefly cinematic, embodied by such noted performers as Sidney Poitier, Morgan Freeman, Scatman Crothers, Michael Clark Duncan, Will Smith, and most recently Don Cheadle. And that's not to mention a certain basketball player whose very name is Magic. Poitier really poured on the magic in Lilies of the Field, for which he won a Best Oscar Best Actor Oscar, and To Sir with Love, which, along with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, made him a #1 box office attraction. In those films, Poitier triumphs through yeoman service to his white benefactors. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is particularly striking in this regard, as it posits miscegenation without evoking sex. Talk about magic. Then he brings up Driving Miss Daisy. What what does the white man get out of this bargain? That's a question asked by John Guare in 6 Degrees of Separation, his brilliant retelling of the true saga of David Hampton, a young personal gay con man who in the 1980s passed himself off as the son of none other than the real Sidney Poitier. Though he started small using the ruse to get into Studio 54, Hampton discovered that countless gullible, whale-heeled New Yorkers vulnerable to the magic Negro myth were only too eager to believe in his Baroque fantasy. One of the few who wasn't fooled was Andy Warhol, who was astonished his underlings believed Hampton's whoppers. Clearly, Warhol had no need for the accoutrement of interracial goodwill. All right, so let me then jump to the conclusion. Obama's fame right now has little to do with his political record. He barely had one, or what he's written in his two, count 'em, books, or even what he's actually said in those stem winders. It's the way he said it that counts the most. It's his manner, which, as presidential hopeful Senator Joe Biden ham-fistedly reminded us, is, quote, articulate. His tone is always genial, his voice warm and unthreatening, and he hasn't called his opponents names despite being baited by the media. Yet. Like a comic book superhero, Obama is there to help out of the sheer goodness of a heart we need not know or understand. For as with all magic Negroes, the less real he seems, the more desirable he becomes. If he were real, white America couldn't project all its fantasies of curative black benevolence on him. What is the point of that? All right, why do I bring that up?
Take me there because I am
Okay,
just like, what the hell did we just look at here?
there's a lot to unpack, and especially like the first third of the McGilchrist Desmet discussion. And one of the things they talk about when they're talking about totalitarianism and the psychology of it is simplified, unnuanced language and grievance.
Mm.
You combine those two, and that is how you get to the totalitarian point. That is how you achieve power, and then you double down on all of that in order to enact the policies you want. Well, we have to do this thing because of this bad person. Wait, you can't criticize what the totalitarian is doing because you aren't allowed to have nuanced thought. You are some kind of ist. Okay, back in the Bolshevik days, in the Maoist days, you were anti-revolutionary. Okay, uh, you it was bourgeois thinking. Well, now it is you. Back to the chart you showed. You aren't allowed to criticize the magic Negro. You aren't allowed to have this nuanced conversation, which in the body of that opinion piece, one of the things he points out is how is Barack Obama going to be the first quote unquote black president when one, he's only half black, two, his father doesn't come from the American experience. His father was a Kenyan student in Hawaii on an academic scholarship. Meanwhile, you have Al Sharpton, who grew up in the quote unquote real Black American experience, was part of the civil rights movement, even. And so has all of this cachet of relevant experience. But that's not what people really want. What they want is the fantasy.
Mm.
What they want is to cookie cutter rubber stamp this thing to make themselves feel better.
So what you're saying is there's still the underlying racism there, but you're able to offload it because it's a uh, projection that makes you feel more comfortable.
Exactly. In our
Yeah.
back and forths of, as you were telling me about this, the tiptoeing you're having to do in this class,
Oh, I don't tiptoe, but I walk softly.
Yes, that's a better
Yes.
way of putting it.
Yeah.
Is you're doing the sticky hands drills,
Oh yeah,
smooth
yeah, yeah,
smooth and
definitely.
circular. Um,
It is definitely the soft martial arts, not the it's more Tai Chi than Wushu, okay?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, um, one of the comments I made is because you got into some of the um I'm brain farting on the term here, racial intersectionality,
hmm
and a critique that the late great Walter Williams and the still great Thomas Sowell have long had, going back decades, of affirmative action is how it is inherently racist.
hmm
And not for the reasons that other people will point out of the what should be obvious but isn't anymore, that there is no such thing as reverse racism. Racism is racism. If you are discriminating against someone or for someone simply because of the color of their skin, that is racist. They went further though and said you are being racist within the black community itself, because the example they would use, I remember Walter Williams used this one specifically a lot, is Walter Williams was a black man who grew up in the projects of Philadelphia. Okay. He is the Will Smith character, except he didn't have a rich uncle in Bel Air to go live in. He had to pull himself out of the projects and, get a PhD in economics and become this well regarded figure in academia and in the more libertarian movement. And he would say, he would make the example, what do does someone like me, who grew up in the slums of Philadelphia, have in common with a kid who grew up in an affluent suburb in Connecticut, other than our melanin level?
hmm
And yet, if we both apply to Harvard or Yale or Columbia at all, they are going to treat us the same. They are going to check the box. They are going to say, see, look at how diverse we are. Look at our growing African American student body. And yet, we have no similar life experience. As you said when we were texting back and forth, you, as white trailer trash, in a growing up in a broken home, have way more in common with Walter Williams than that black kid who grows up in an affluent suburb somewhere like, Connecticut or
hmm
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing about intersectionality is where they shoot themselves in the foot. So so just a kind of a review on it, it's not the original papers on it was Kimberly Crenshaw, and some of the work of Derek Bell, who Obama introduced famously in a speech to the world. Uh, it is the intersections of all your identities. So the way she put it was the difference between it was actually a legal case. She was a lawyer, and her argument that became famous, that became a paper out of it, was a case she had with black female nurse. I think it was nurses. Don't quote me on that part, but it was a profession, and I think it was nurses. And there was discrimination going on, which at the time in the late 80s, early 90s, that did happen a lot. And she said, and the court shot it down because they weren't discriminating because they were black. And she said, no, it's not because they're black. It's because they're black and female. They intersect and they create a new thing, which is true. It is true. And if you have some sort of structure where that discrimination can happen, which existed more back then yes, you will be more likely to come across this. So it was the argument that is no, the discrimination isn't because they're black. The discrimination is because they're black and female. And it's not because they're female. It's not because they're black. It's because they're both. And so that's where intersectionality grew, and then they took it and ran with it. So now it's are you Hispanic and female and disabled and poor socioeconomic status, all of these things. How do we win the oppression Olympics now? But where they shoot themselves in the foot is she was a middle class black woman. actually upper middle class because she was a lawyer at some point, right? But she grew up middle class. I have more in common with a poor black man than she has with him because I am man and I was poor and I grew up in a low
To
socioeconomic
to use
status,
their
kind of.
own language, you have more points of intersection.
Yeah, I have more points of intersection with a young black poor male than she does. But they don't they tend to boost up whichever one. She's like, "Oh, because I'm black, I know." I'm like, "No, because you're female, you don't know because you're not male."
And the cruel the cruelty of this is what it does to warp thinking by erasing even the possibility of nuance. You can't say, well, wait a minute. Is that true? It's no, it is ipso facto. And if you question it, then you are a racist. And you've mentioned this, but it's been a while. You had a young trainer that was working under you,
Hmm.
who you met up with again years later, who kind of apologized to you of, I
Kind of.
didn't
He
like
straight
you.
out did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't like you because I thought you were racist. I thought you were being hard on me because I'm black. And no, you were being hard on him because you saw potential in him.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be the next me at that company. I thought I was going to duplicate myself as a trainer, and I was in charge at the time. And I was hard on him because I saw the potential in him, and he took it. Well, and he even said he's the one that gave me the Shelby Steele book, White
I'd
Guilt.
forgotten that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and uh, and he was like, "No, I thought you were being racist the whole time, but you were trying to help me." And you know where he learned that? Where he learned what I was trying to do? He ultimately failed because he thought I was being racist and he quit. And he had to join the military because he had a family on the way. And in the military, he learned, oh my gosh, they're hard on me because they expect something. And he
The
came back and apologized. That was actually part of this journey to actually starting this channel because I was like, gosh, people need to hear this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it just so happened that I was scrolling through X last
But
night
he was
trying
taught
to
it in school. That's the main point too.
exactly, and
He
that's
was
what I
he
was
was
getting
going
to.
by his education that, oh, if they do this, it's microaggressions. If they
The
do that, it's racism.
the destruction of language, the destruction of nuance, and the hijacking of the left hemisphere, which again, go watch the McGilchrist Desmet. They get into it, but in a way that is very accessible. He essentially briefly summarizes his work on why the left hemisphere is the way it is and why it likes to do what it likes to do. But that leads to things like something I had forgotten about, and somebody reposted this last night or this morning when I was scrolling through X, that remember years back when the Antifa riots were first getting going, and there was a shooting in Portland simply because the guy was wearing a MAGA hat.
Hmm.
There was a kid wearing a red MAGA hat, and this Antifa guy shot him. And a reporter managed to track this guy down, which then led to the FBI tracking him down. But anyway, a reporter
Yeah,
managed to
it
track
sucks
him
that a
down.
reporter had to track him down for the
Yeah,
FBI to get him.
yeah.
But
And you can find it. The interview is video recorded. You can find it. But basically, what this guy said was, "Well, I had to. I mean, I could have done nothing and then watch this guy kill one of my friends who's a person of color. So I had to do it to protect him, to protect people of color from being killed by this evil racist." Fast forward a few years, that is the exact line of thinking that we see in the text and in the manifesto of the Charlie Kirk assassin.
hmm
By your very being, by simply the fact that you exist. And where this connects with the current events is Jay Jones won the election
oh God.
for Virginia Attorney General. For anyone who doesn't
Ooh.
know, there was a leak of a text exchange with Jay Jones, and the person he was texting tried to get him to walk it back. He like gave him an out of like, dude, that's hyperbole. Don't you think that's going too far? And Jay Jones doubled down, saying that not only should my opponents, because they're so evil, not only should they be killed, I want their
No, no,
small
no,
children to
worse. I was about
die.
to say the
Yeah,
kids. Yeah, the kids.
their their small children should die in the arms of their mother because tragedy is the only thing that will get these evil people to change their mind and change their ways. That guy was just elected attorney general of a major state.
Yep. Yeah.
By your very existence, this is who and what you are. There is no social contract. There is no social compact with people like that. What the social compact says is that there are lines we don't cross, and we must have reasoned, rational, even if it's emotional, discussion and debate with each other.
Well, I always say this is one of the things that keeps me having hope in humanity is the hardest, most seasoned gangbangers in jail will still take out the child molester that gets in there because they crossed the line at the children.
Mm-hmm.
This guy did not cross the line at the children, and he got elected to the highest position of law enforcement in a state.
And numerous exit polls showed basically the voters were Sam Harris. Well, yeah, what that guy said was bad, but Trump is worse. How?
Yeah, what do
How
you
is
what
what Trump is
let's
saying or doing worse than that?
let's quote Sam Harris. There could be a basement full of dead babies, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's what he said about Biden, about Hunter Biden and his laptop of I don't care because Trump is that much of an existential threat. And and a big part of what McGilchrist and Desmet are talking about is that is totally rational if you're in that tight of a bubble, that opaque of a bubble is, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, what about all this other stuff? All that other stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah, which is really one of the tough things about being human because we do feel strongly about some things, right? And you should. You should feel strongly about things. Like I'm with the gangbangers and everybody that don't mess with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
If you're messing with the kids, you're on my bad side. I don't care. I don't care what it is. If it's bad for them, you're on my bad side. Uh, you should feel strongly about that. But if it's this person or this tribe or the others, if it's the what we talk about it, the tribalism, if you become blinded by that nature that we have to have strong feelings about our virtues, then you are easily led. Like someone would probably be able to lead me somewhere by saying, this is hurting kids,
Mm-hmm.
just by that example, right? Now, thankfully, I at least I'm a big take a step back and take two breaths before you make any big decision kind of person. Thankfully, I have that about me that I can say, is it really? But I can be fooled that way, and I can be pushed to action that way. But if it's this group bad, now we're getting into very dangerous territory, and the fact that
Yeah,
we've become so I mean, it's 30%, 30%, and then 40% in the middle.
exactly.
30% is a big number when you talk about 330 million people, right? All right, if you felt a little hiccup there, we took a little break, but let me tie what bring what we've been talking about home, and then we're going to go into an actual clip from that Desmet interview. But it sounds like two white dudes just screaming at the clouds here, but this is how it affects everybody. I'm going to quote another guy, Scott Galloway here, and he's 100% correct because they tell you it's about race. They tell you it's about sex. They tell you it's about all of these things, but really it's a class issue. And if we figure that out, we can all unite because the class differential is getting greater and greater and greater and greater.
Mm-hmm.
The delta between the middle class is going away. It's getting to where you're either poor or you're exceptionally wealthy, and affirmative action is part of it. Because this is the quote from Scott Galloway, affirmative action wasn't about being black or white, it was about being green. Green meaning money. Because
Mm-hmm.
what happened was more people from minority statuses that had a lot of money were getting into these institutions, and he was speaking of Harvard particularly, Harvard and Yale particularly, were getting into these higher institutions because their parents had money, but they didn't have the chops to do it. Whereas when we were a meritocracy, if you were poor, but you were intelligent and hardworking and all of the other things that go into being successful, you could get into these places. And so what it did was it just took the highest of the minority groups and put them in there and kept them high. That's why it's being supported by the Al Sharptons of the world, the Jesse Jacksons of the world, because they have the means. They have the means, the Obamas of the world, because like you said, he came in as an academic from Kenya. And what we see from these people that come in from other countries, not from the latest immigration debacle we had, but from previous generations where it was the best of the best from the countries, right? So they would come in and they would start the legacy. And
Well,
so
back
notice
back
they
to
didn't you notice they didn't get rid of legacy admissions when they got rid of a lot of the other
uh,
criteria like
yeah,
SATs and
you,
stuff.
you brought up Obama, and it's funny his background, and it's not in that article by Ernstein, but other people made this point at the time was, hold on a second, this is a guy who his his mother's parents were wealthy, and Obama attended a very exclusive, expensive private school when he moved back to Hawaii. And then he went to Columbia on some kind of scholarship that's a little bit dubious of who paid for it, but we'll set that aside. I believe he did his undergrad at Columbia, and then he went to Harvard Law, pretty much none of which he paid for himself. And yet, he's supposed to identify with you, the Uh, uh, so this came up in the exit polling for the New York mayoral race, because in his victory speech, Mamdani, listed off all of the intersectional Olympics of person from this country who's a maid and person from that country who's a cab driver and blah blah blah. And someone made the point and showed the exit polling data. Actually, no, the the working class immigrants voted
Voted
for
against him.
Cuomo.
Yeah.
It was the more affluent people, immigrants and native New Yorkers, and most especially young women, who overwhelmingly voted for Mamdani and put him over 50% of the vote. But the language, the simplified, lack of nuanced language says, no, no, I'm one of you. No, no, I represent the working class. Dude, your parents are wealthy. You're wealthy. You brag about how you live in this rent controlled apartment. Uh, just stop. But again, the lack of nuance, not the lack of nuance in our language creates a lack of nuance in our thinking,
Well,
which
let's
is
look
the
let's
whole
look at
point
the
about the
silver
totalitarianism.
let's look at the silver lining to all this. Texas is about to get rich. Well, because Wall Street has already slowly started moving to Austin. If this keeps up in New York, Austin will be the new Wall Street, and Texas will be very, very, very rich. We
Yeah,
will
well,
we'll probably take over California as the highest GDP of any state, which both Texas and California are in the top 25 of all countries in the world. So,
well, hopefully Texas stays Texas. All right. Uh,
well, the guys who don't want to be communists are the ones that are coming. So that's at least a plus, which is the problem too, because that just makes that area more extreme, which is New York, because
yeah,
all the people that can't live with that are leaving. The people who want to live with it are staying, and so they're just going to keep voting more and more and more extreme.
absolutely. So we're gonna close this out with a clip of Desmet from this discussion with McGilchrist, which I'm glad we started a little later than usual. I said, hold on, I want to finish watching this. And I'm glad I did, because near the end, he said something that I thought was incredibly profound. And to set this up, he's using as an example Bushido, the art of the samurai, and he talks about how there are these principles and philosophies and sayings, one of which was you don't train the skill for the sake of the skill. You train the skill so that you will forget it when you get onto the battlefield.
Hmm.
Because once you actually engage in combat, it must become intuitive. If you are thinking, you are going to die.
And I'm going to put this in technical terms from a skill development standpoint. Uh, there's four stages. You have unconscious incompetence, which means you suck and you don't know it. Then you have conscious incompetence, which either someone points it out or you figure it out that, oh my gosh, I suck, but I can see it. And then you have conscious conscious competence, which means I can do it right, but I have to think really hard. And then the last step is unconscious competence, which is what we try to do with our athletes and stuff. So what I do is take basic movement skills and I try to make it to where they can do it without thinking so they can focus on their sport. And so that's when you get to the unconscious competence part where you're good at it and you don't have to think about it. And so to put Western terms to what he's about to say, that's what I would
Yeah,
say.
and what's really interesting is he's about to give one of the first principles of the Bushido for how you get there, and it's not what you would think.
All
Make
right.
sure you share with sound, Boomer.
I did share with sound.
All right.
The first rule of samurai culture, of Budo, the samurai martial arts, was, you can find it on Wikipedia, it's one of the few things that is accurate on Wikipedia. The first rule was, speak sincerely. So, speak sincerely. Why? Why was it so important for a samurai who wanted to develop his intuition to speak sincerely? Because the samurai intuitively understood that every time you speak sincerely, you literally punch a hole in your ego. That's exactly what speaking the truth means. That's exactly what sincerity means. Speaking sincerely means that you show something that people usually hide behind their outer ideal images, behind the veil of appearances. So every time we speak sincerely, we speak from our most vulnerable point.
All right. Pause it.
Which is which is great because there are cultures that do the opposite because it is more shameful in that cultural setting
Mhm.
to not know the answer or to have a wrong answer than it is or just excuse me, to not know the answer than it is to have a wrong answer. Someone brought up, I'm trying to remember where I heard this, but it was in the American version of Do You Want to Be a Millionaire? Phone a friend happens 91% of the time.
Oh yeah.
In the Russian version, it almost never happens because it is shameful to actually not know the answer and have to phone a friend and get help.
So my wife told me something interesting the other day that just popped into my head because boy, is it applicable here. That um, one of the safest airlines right now is Korean Air. It used to be one of the worst. They had a lot of crashes in the 70s and 80s. And so they did a very extensive study into the black boxes and into what was happening during these airline crashes. And what they discovered was that because of the deferential culture that is ingrained in their language, when the co-pilot or the navigator or whoever would say something to the pilot, it was not clear that it was something emergency or
Mm.
critical, or there was one in particular where either the instruments were messed up or the pilot was messed up, and he didn't realize how low he was. And so instead of coming in for a soft landing, they crashed because they were going too fast because their descent wasn't managed properly. And in the recording, the co-pilot basically tells the pilot you're too low, but he does it in a way that is deferential. And so the pilot doesn't realize, holy crap, we're too low.
Hmm.
It's basically, hey, are you sure you're doing this right? Is kind of how it was described. So what they did that immediately changed, the one simple trick that we all always complain about. Well, actually, this time it worked. It is now mandatory on Korean Airlines that in the cabin you speak English.
Hmm.
All
Interesting.
of their crew members, the flight crew is required to speak English to each other because we don't really have that deferential idea. Those words exist, but it's not ingrained inherently in the way we speak.
Hmm. Yeah, which is, I mean, that's important because we can look across a lot of cultures. I remember one of the greatest revelations I got from just basically sharing in class group discussion was in cognitive psychology. Uh, One of the ladies in the class, she was North African Muslim. I don't remember which country. It might have been Libya or Egypt, but she was talking about this is something that's completely new to me. And it was on the subject of trust. And in her culture, it was she said that she's not used to hearing the words, well, I don't know, because it was something that the professor was like, oh, I
Mm.
don't know about that answer. I'll have to look that up. And she was like, I'm not used to that because people in my culture will lie to you before saying I don't know because it is shameful to not know. So they will just make something up.
And,
And
and to the point of that discussion, this is how we create our own microcosm of tyranny that then makes us susceptible to the macrocosm of tyranny.
which
And
is which yeah, which is
wasn't
to,
it the Gulag Archipelago where Solzhenitsyn says one man speaking the truth can bring down a tyranny, or something to that effect? That
it's
may
something
be a
similar to
paraphrase.
that yet.
Yeah. And the what what Desmond is talking about, supported by McGilchrist and his work on the hemispheres of the brain, is that your left hemisphere will create a tyranny in your own mind
Hmm.
because it wants that order. Something they talked about early in the beginning, which I thought was great, is this. Desmond talks about this obsession we have with making everything mechanical, with treating complex human systems,
Like
complex
complicated systems.
environmental,
Yeah.
yeah, systems, trying to make them like a machine. Why? Well, because we have absolute control over a machine. We made it.
Hmm.
Literally, we made it.
Which was my difficulty in that skill development class because it was a human factors subclass. It was an elective for me. And the thing about human factors, for those that aren't familiar with the differences in psychology paths, human factors is the information theory. We're trying. They treat the brain like it's a computer, which is not true, and it's where they go wrong. Now they've contributed a lot to the field because information theory has a lot of merit. The problem is computers are predictable. Humans are not because we're complex systems, not complicated systems.
Mm.
Computers are very complicated, but if I press the W on my keyboard right now, a W will show up. If not, the computer's broken, throw it away. Okay? And the human being is not that way.
Mm.
If you push the W button in my psyche and I come out with Y, then you have to actually figure out why there was something wrong with the translation. Maybe I had a stroke. Maybe there was some trauma in my childhood where I have an aversity to W's like I do with feet. There's something in there that's malleable. We're plastic. Computers aren't that way, and the human factors treat it that way. So lots of contributions, on perception and things like that. But at the same time, we're not computers.
You just reminded me of where I'll close.
Oh, did you want to play more of that video?
No, no, that was the
Okay.
point I wanted to get at as our closing thought, and it just made me think of socking all the way back to kind of where I started talking about Mash Walsh and the complaining about the death of pop culture, and it is the death of nuance. So a great example of this is modern Star Trek, and by that I mean pretty much all Star Trek that has been released after 2000 is garbage. And one of, if not the best episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, The Measure of a Man, where they have a basically a court martial case to decide, is Data a sentient individual who gets to make his own choices, or is he the property of Starfleet?
Mm.
And one of the things that makes it so great is that in the climactic soliloquy that Patrick Stewart gives as the captain, he basically says, "I don't know, and frankly, you don't know either." And so we shouldn't be making this decision because you cannot say definitively yes or no. So shouldn't we err on the side of the complex, as you put it? And the reason this particular episode popped into my head is because it's so applicable here. But just watch the opening of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you get that voiceover of what it is that they're doing. The whole concept of Star Trek, the whole concept of good sci-fi is the unknown. Let's go out, let's go see what's out there.
Hmm.
It is taking the age of exploration, from the age of sail in our own world history and fast forwarding it hundreds of years and saying, now let's do it out there among the stars. You can't write good stories about that if you don't have that curiosity within your own self. If your thinking is too rigid, how are you going to write a story about exploration and curiosity and the unknown and actually make it compelling?
Yeah, I didn't I quote this a long time ago, and I can't remember who to attribute it to, but wasn't it something to the extent of curiosity is the cure to ego?
Yes. Where did that come from?
God, it was like episode 30 or something. So we're looking like 5 years back. Uh, oh, we're at 401, by the way. We didn't even address that we hit
Oh, okay.
400 last time,
Go
but
us.
go us. With 86 followers. But no, but we vent a little bit. But no, curiosity is actually exactly what Desmond was talking about there, that
Mhm.
it is a cure to ego. Because in order to be curious, you have to ask my favorite question. I was just at a science fair the other day, judging, presentations and stuff. Curiosity is the why. If you can ask why, and it annoys people, but someone says, "Oh, this is this, we did it during COVID. Oh, you need to do this and this and this and this, and you got to lock down. You got to do that. Blah, blah, blah. You can't take this. You have to take that." And it's like, why? Give me a good why. All I'm
Mhm.
asking for is a good why. And they never answered that. Curiosity is the thing that breaks totalitarianism. Oh, well, you need to go to war with this country. Well, why? This guy's bad. Why?
Yep. And the epic, probably most famous scene from 1984 is in mid speech, in mid rant, the speaker shifts who we're at war with, and the whole crowd just goes along with it. We've
Hmm.
always been at war with. They've always been the enemy. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Because there is no
Diamonds are forever.
curiosity is not allowed in
Hmm.
1984, and so everyone's thinking is incredibly rigid. And the cure for that, which I want to go into in more detail next time, is I've gotten to part two of Martha Beck's book where she gets into the cure for for being a dictator within your own mind, for letting your left hemisphere rule you like a totalitarian, is creativity. Creativity is what exercises the right hemisphere. It's what wakes it up. It's what allows it to coexist as an equal partner with the left hemisphere rather than being constantly led by the totalitarian left hemisphere. And I there is some new, again, nuance is today's key word. There is some nuance there, and I want to get into because there is a problem on the right gro growing amongst the new right, even people like you who aren't really right, but are part of this collective of we're not insane. We're not crazy woke people
Yeah,
sprinting madly to the
The
left.
Colin Wright part of the right, as if we're going
Exactly.
to put right as much as we can in there,
But
spelled differently.
there is something to be said for, hold on a second, the I'm just asking questions crowd. That is faux curiosity. And that is the case I will make next time, specifically vis-a-vis Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson.
Mm, mm. Okay, so I need so my homework again. I'll have to listen to. I guess Tucker was just on Modern Wisdom, and if there's somebody I trust to ask the right questions, that's the
Mm-hmm.
channel. So I'll watch that before we go on there. Uh, God, he had so much promise, and the last 5 years, I'm talking about Carlson here.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to that man,
the
and
la the last like
audience
the last
capture
couple of
maybe.
years he was at Fox, and then like the first year or maybe two when he was fired from Fox, he was quite the, oh wow, this is like he's kind of the new Rogan.
Hmm.
And then like you say, audience capture. Yeah, I'm going to get into that with Christopher Rufo has written well on this. Konstantin Kisin has written
Hmm.
on this, and so that's where I'm going to go for my sources and inspiration, and then we'll
Well,
talk about our thoughts on that
yeah,
next
I've
time.
gotten back into it. I'm going to see if he's got anything on this with more Coleman Hughes stuff too. That guy's a
Mhm.
cool cat. He is great. Uh, but yeah, so we'll do our homework there. So I guess that's our next social episode. What are we gonna do? Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time. I wanted to stick with Perrin and Fail and the slog in their relationship and where they both become toxic while they're trying to figure out how to be their authentic selves. And then we'll see if there are any comments on reevaluating the slog and if it's as bad as we thought it was or no, it's bad. See what you people out there think.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, we'll see what it is because I still thought it was a slog even on my what fifth read through
Yeah.
of it as an adult. So, but again, that's what we talked about last time is the your different experience versus my different experience.
Mhm.
That is not how I would react in a relationship, uh, in the slightest. But yeah, so we'll go into that. Anything else before we close out?
That's all I got. We'll see y'all next time.
Yep, we'll see you next time.